Wow, okay. You give me a lot of options there. I don't know how I can handle that. Market analyst, that sounds fancy. All right, well, hey, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started pretty close to on time here. So I hope you all had a really great breakfast, and there is still more food over there. So as we're going through today, if you want to get up and get more, please make sure we get our money's worth. And I always say that I go to a lot of conferences, and I still feel like the food at the Northern Center is amongst the best convention area food that you can get, not only in the UP, but really in the whole state of Michigan. So we're really fortunate to be here. For those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Christopher Germain. I'm the Chief Executive Officer, at the Lake Superior Community Partnership. We had really the honor to work with the Land Bank Authority, Marquette County, and a number of other local governments, as well as the Community Foundation and the DTE Foundation, to fund the target market analysis. And so we were on the back end, the administrative side, handling invoicing and working directly with Sharon here. But the TMA is really part of a bigger housing strategy. And so if any of you have been to any of our other events, you've heard about our strategic housing framework at this stage, which includes 6 goals. One of those goals is up-to-date and accurate data, because it completely changes the conversation around. We go from, yes, housing is hard and it's expensive and there's not enough of it, to here's where we're actually missing things. And here's where the market actually aligns with demand and supply, and how do we actually move from that data to adding units going forward. So I really appreciate you all being here this morning. You're going to lead today really, hopefully, as ambassadors of this data, where you're going to be able to understand it and explain it to other folks. And when you hear people say things that just aren't true, it's really up to us to start correcting those misconceptions, right? And to start using this data and working directly with developers, large and small, who can actually help add units 1, 2 at a time, or maybe 200 at a time, really just depending on what those projects look like. So we're really honored to be working with Sharon in particular. Sharon has a really long history of doing this type of work throughout the state of Michigan. We learned last night she has a Florida office as well. So apparently once you have 2 offices, that means you're legit. That's what we learned last night. So we're really excited. But when I was at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation prior to this job, we worked with Sharon very closely in a number of different ways. One of those were a number of TMAs across the state. But then Sharon also served on the DDA in the city of Laingsburg. And she just has this incredible mindset for working with data and really helping you tell a story as part of it. So the whole goal today, again, is to help you be able to tell that story outside of this room and move us forward in this conversation together. So with that, I'm going to turn it right over to Sharon.
Let me do a quick test. Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Is that microphone the right volume? Awesome. Okay, Sharon Woods. I'm a market analyst, and I've been doing market studies for coming close on 35 years. So my entire career, really. And so today we wanted to talk with you about the residential target market analysis that I completed just a couple of months ago. And it was really a significant undertaking. You know, I did the analysis myself. So I'm a one-man shop. And, you know, I'm the one who actually created and ran the model and did the numbers. So I'm pretty close to those numbers. And what I want to do with you today is kind of do a deep dive into some of the data. So I've been doing housing studies for about 25 years out of those 35. I've been to the Upper Peninsula many times. I've done a number of countywide studies, actually not just housing, but retail as well. Like I did a retail study for Schoolcraft County, like, 10 years ago or so. So I've been up here often, and I'm really excited actually to be back. When I got off the plane and I saw just the lush vegetation and smelling the fresh air, we were talking about that. How this is really a special place that you have, and you know that, of course. I'm from Lansing, Michigan, so I am a Michigander, but I'm kind of downstate. I live in a community that has 2,000 residents, so I understand what it's like to live in a small community. I've also lived in some urban places like downtown Minneapolis and downtown Cincinnati, and I've worked in downtown Detroit. So I kind of can relate to cities as well as small communities as well, like Gwen or K.I. Sawyer. So what I want to do today, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. So my goal today is not to stand up here with a clicker and just talk at you and take you through a PowerPoint and explain to you the data and what it means. What I really want to do is have you go with me on this journey for the next hour or so and kind of do a deep dive into the handouts that you have. And if we could kind of go through the handout together, so it's a little more interactive. I'm really, rather than have you guys, just eyes on Sharon and eyes on the screen, we might actually at some point, we might show you a few pages on the screen to just get us going, but then at some point we may actually turn the screen off because you'll be actually focused on your handout and studying the data with me in the handout. Does that sound good? Because the reason is that the handout is actually an extract from the complete market study. You're just getting a few pages. So the complete market study is actually like several documents. There is a document focused on just demographics and a document focused on a real estate analysis. And then the pages you have are part of document 1, which is what is the residential market potential? And we'll go through these exhibits together. What I really want to do is explain to you how to read the exhibits, because there's a lot on the page, right? I mean, there's titles and x-axis, y-axis, there's charts, there's narrative, and we'll go through it together and I'll explain it to you. So my goal is that at the end of today, you would be able to pull up the complete market study online. And you guys will help guide them to where that URL is, where you could retrieve the complete document. And then when you dive into the complete study, you would actually be able to navigate these charts and say, oh yeah, I remember Sharon explained how to read this. And the idea is that hopefully a quick show of hands, how many of you are in public sector? Public sector officials or public sector at all? How about private sector? Developers, it's really diverse. What a great mix. That's awesome. So in the public sector, if you can help us by sharing the studies and the handouts, if you want, sharing them with the private sector individuals that you work with in your community. So they may be private sector. I'm thinking about really the investment community that I'm hoping you'll take these documents and consider them to be yours. They are yours for you to use and for you to give and share freely. So share them with real estate brokers and lenders, property owners, property managers, developers, builders, landowners, did I mention, and financial institutions. Share these reports and scatter them. And then hopefully after today, you'll be able to explain a couple of the exhibits, to open the pages and say, hey, I want you to take a look at this. Here's the market potential for Negaunee. Here's how many residential units we can build that are owner versus renter. And here's the target markets. And here's the building formats that those target markets might be interested in. And here are the price brackets that those target markets might actually be willing to tolerate, to pay in terms of home values and rents. So that's what I would like to accomplish today. Sound good? So because we have a large group, usually I do these, I call it a tutorial actually. Usually I do these with a much smaller group and then we kind of get more into a conversation and a discussion. Because we have a very limited amount of time this morning, and by the way, we're gonna do breakout group sessions afterwards. So on the agenda, you'll find that there's actually breakout sessions that we'll do, and then we'll have a lot more time for Q&A and discussion, and you can flag me down, raise your hand, whatever, and if I can get through this efficiently, we might have time at the end for Q&A as well. But if you have questions as I go, do me a favor and just write them down for now. Write them down, because I find that often you might find that I actually answer the question in just a few minutes because maybe I just didn't get there. So that's kind of been my experience. But and you can also, by the way, I'm here all day. So you can flag me down at lunch. If you want to have a conversation, we could step out in the hall and I can maybe answer questions for you, whatever you like. I'm here for the duration of the summit. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to work off of the Borealis Beach handout. So it's the one that says Borealis Beach. If you have the other handouts, you can just kind of follow along in the handout that you may have. There's two others for Blueberry Farms and the Iron Core. So, you know, again, it's a tutorial to explain how to read the data. There may be extra packets of Borealis Beach, possibly. Does anybody know if there were any spare packets, just in case you really want to follow along on this region? And the reason is, I'm going to do another show of hands. Who here would say that you're primarily in the Borealis Beach region? Okay, and how about Blueberry Farms? Yeah, look around. Okay. Unfortunately, I wish we had better representation. Who has maybe one toe dipped into Blueberry Farms? Anybody? A toe dipped? Okay, awesome. And how about Iron Core? And okay, awesome, good. So a good representation. Yeah, we have extras. Antonio will, if you raise your hand and you want to follow along in the Borealis Beach region, raise your hand. Antonio will get you a packet. Okay, so he's got the first slide up there, which is where I want to start. I'm going to skip, like we're going to go through this together, literally. Just follow along in your handout. So you'll see that the very first page is actually section 1C. So this is just a reminder that this is just a handout. There's section 1A, section 1B that I already skipped over, and we're jumping into section 1C with the handout because this is pulled out of the complete market study. So in section 1C, so you could find this narrative in the full study under section 1C. And there's a very brief, you know, just a one-page summary intended really to kind of give you the words that you may need to explain this to somebody else. It's an easy read, just one page. But we're going to start with this chart, this housing mismatch chart. And so reading the title is really important, making sure we're grounded on the right geography. So it says Marquette City. You know, I could have said the city of Marquette, but I'm just trying to keep my title to fit the page. So that's why it says Marquette City. And other pages might say Marquette County. So, you know, watch for the geography change. And as you flip in here, there's other pages that will say Harvey or Trowbridge Park. You know, so watch the geography as it shifts before you try to read the data. So this is capture with new builds versus existing units. And the year, it's a one-year snapshot, and I pushed it out to the year 2025. So I actually did the analysis in 2023, and just kind of bumped it out a couple of years, assuming that, it's really reflecting the market potential and what we can do to get things going this year, perhaps. You know, you might have a partial year this year and a first full year next year if you're an actual developer acting on these numbers. So these are all percents. And again, the second part, this is like reading a chart 101, right? Read the x-axis and then read the y-axis. So these are percents. And there's two color codes on here. The blue is basically the demand by building format and by tenure. So tenure means owner versus renter. That's tenure when I say tenure. So the owners are on the left, the renters are on the right. And I broke it into 3 categories for each of those tenures on building, kind of trying to give you an idea of what sort of building format the market potential would indicate. And we'll get into the real numbers in just a few minutes. So the way to read this is that based on the results of the market analysis, only 43% of homeowners migrating into Marquette, the city of Marquette every year, 43% of them would be inclined to look for a house or a large cottage or something with a private yard. 43%. So less than half of your owners that are migrating, brand new owners migrating into the city of Marquette are actually looking for a house. Are looking for a detached house. However, your supply, 92% of the current supply of units for sale is actually detached, is of that same format, detached houses. So that is a mismatch. It means that we have, in general, we should have plenty of detached houses for new migrating owners. And they're not really looking for that. What they're looking for is townhouses. they're actually looking, so 40%, another 40% are looking for attached formats. And I'm kind of translating that for you, things like townhouses side by side with nice, spacious porches or balconies, depending on the setting, or depending on the parcel or the location. It may be porches in a neighborhood, or it may be balconies overlooking a lake, for example, or another, great amenity. And then having a vista view. They really want a view. And a view could be a lake, even the bluffs or the hillside or luscious vegetation that we have everywhere here. It could also be downtown nightlife. So it could be that these are in a downtown setting with a view of downtown nightlife. So just, being a real urban, trendy, hip, cool kind of location like a downtown, but usually a vista view. And then 17% would be inclined to purchase a condo. And when I say condo, it's not quite the form of ownership that I'm referring to as much as the building format that I'm imagining. So a townhouse, you have your own private entrance, and you may have your own little porch and a back slab or a balcony, and you've got your own, usually for owner, at least a one-car garage of some sort, and it may be attached to the house, to the townhouse, but not necessarily. It could be in a pod of garages, a row of garages that is detached. I'm getting into format, pretty detailed here. Whereas condos, you have a shared entrance, and you kind of walk into the building, and then it breaks out from a stairwell, and you go into your own individual unit. In some locations where land is at a premium, that's a really great model, a really great way to get owners in and maximize on the value of that land. So 17% would be inclined to accept that kind of a format, to buy, to purchase, whereas only 2% of your choices are actually in that format. So we have it here. Absolutely, but not as much as your migrating and in migrating target markets would actually seek. And on the renters, you can read it the same way. Renters is interesting. 15% of the existing housing stock for lease or renter occupied, only 15% of those units are detached, like small houses or subdivided houses, cottages, mobile homes, accessory dwellings, that kind of thing. Whereas 43% of the renters are actually looking for that. So the interesting thing about the Upper Peninsula, there's a culture, and we find this actually a lot in Michigan, is that renters don't really want to be warehoused into apartment complexes. You will not hear me advocate for apartment complexes. What I will advocate for is really, cottages, duplexes, subdivided mansion style houses that are actually apartment houses. We call them apartment houses. Like, you actually build it, it looks like a mansion style house, but it might actually be a fourplex, and it's built and designed to be a fourplex intentionally, or cottages. And so downtown lofts, walk-ups, and courtyard apartments. So that's kind of how to read it. Downtown lofts, comma, walk-ups are like a 12-plex building, 4 lofts on each of 3 levels, and every unit has a corner. So you have windows on at least 2 sides for every loft. That's kind of a walk-up, and it's usually an urban type format with a very shallow setback, and it kind of hugs a sidewalk. That's a walk-up building. And then courtyard apartments, those words are read together. Courtyard apartment. So it's an apartment building, but it's not, I don't call it an apartment complex because I don't want it to look like a warehouse. I don't want it to look like a big box. It's more like an intimate sized apartment building that has a courtyard in the middle. So again, we're letting sunlight in and letting the fresh air in and letting there be a public realm within that building. So I'm throwing a lot at you, I realize, and I'm going to keep going because I want to go to the next page. So this is the annual market potential. And I think at this point, Antonio, we could maybe turn the presentation off even, like Or do you guys find it helpful to have the pages up here for a little while? If Antonio loses track, he might turn it down, like turn it off later. But again, I'm really hoping you'll go with me through your handout and actually read the numbers on the page with me, rather than have me just kind of talk the data at you. So the next page is annual market potential, but I'm going to flip past that. I'm actually going to flip through past page 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to go to page 7. It looks like a histogram like this. I hope you guys can see that. That's exactly right. Thank you, Antonio. And then go one more page, Antonio. There we go. So towards the bottom of this page, you'll see, so I'm going to explain what's on this page, but towards the bottom, you'll see a long bar that shows colleges and cafes, and the number is 282. So I want to, I'm on this page because I want to explain that a little bit before we go back into the prior pages and I explain those a little better. So these are the renter target markets for the city of Marquette. These, if you are a renter migrating into the city of Marquette, there's a high inclination that you fit into these brackets. And 282 of them are in the colleges and cafes category. Now, colleges and cafes is not strictly students. It could include, excuse me, sorry. It could include faculty and staff and alumni and individuals who are not even directly connected to the college, but have stayed because they have a strong affinity to like some of the sports teams, or they just feel, being an alumni is a strong part of their identity. So they identify with universities in some way, but not necessarily students, not just students. And then I also like to look at striving singles, another 127. So striving singles may be part-time students, and they have very high movership rates. Sometimes they're working full-time jobs and trying to go to school part-time. So those two groups together, I've learned just from experience and doing a lot of university studies, that if I combine those numbers together, they come out to be really close to what student enrollment is in general. Like they just putting them together, they're very closely related. So the reason why I'm pointing this out is there are some charts that I flipped past that we're going to go back to, where I actually took those two groups out of the data. I just peeled them away and set them aside. And I created some charts in here where I said, these charts exclude the students. In other words, they exclude the colleges and cafes and the striving singles. Just because I wanted, the thing is that these two groups have very high movership rates and very high turnover, like almost 100% of them move every year. And they tend to inflate the market potential because of that. They come and go, and they tend to move every year. And I didn't want them to, sometimes when I leave them in, they tend to kind of really inflate the numbers and kind of skew the data a little bit. So if you're a developer building new housing units in the city of Marquette, or if you want to share this with a developer who's interested in doing that, and you don't really want to build student housing, then look at the charts that exclude those two categories. Does that make sense? So these I want to explain real quickly. So there's about 30, I believe, target markets on this page. And if you read the top one, it says Platinum Prosperity, that's A02, is basically the Experian code. So I purchased this data. I get these questions a lot. I'm anticipating the questions you have in your mind. Where did she get this? Did she define them herself? No, I actually purchased this from Experian. So Experian is one of the 3 or 4 companies now that can provide you, any of you, with your credit score. And if you can imagine, if they know your credit score, they know everything about what's in your wallet and your lifestyle and how you manage money. And when I say lifestyle, what are your household attributes? Are you single? married? Do you have children? Are you divorced? Have you recently lost somebody in your family? Do you own or lease a car? Do you own or lease a home? They know so much about you and what magazines you read and what radio stations you listen to. You know, they kind of, this lifestyle cluster data, there's about, as you read through these names, some of them kind of sound strange, right? They're just giving you a little bit of a glimpse, the labels, just a glimpse as to how they behave. But the data that I have is 20 pages of data on every one of these target markets. So I could peel one target market off and I have 20 pages of data. And I'm going to show you later some of that data that correlates with housing specifically. But they can go into like Bohemian Groove and say, well, 80% of them kind of subscribe to this kind of magazine and 90% of them tend to vote this way. You know, so there's tons and tons, almost too much data. Like, do they tie their shoes or use Velcro? I mean, there's almost too much data. So I'm not going to throw all of that at you, I promise. But these 30, there's 71 in the complete set, and these 30 tend to show up somewhere in Marquette County. Some of them are in Gwynn, and some of them are in West Ishpeming, and some are in Marquette. So when you read this, and if there's no data, for example, on this page, homemade happiness, red, white, bluegrass, why are they even on the list if there's no data? The reason is that they should, these two target markets show up somewhere else in the study. And I want to show you that there's somewhere in the, they're in the study area. They showed up in the study, but they're not in Marquette. And the inverse really works when we go to places like Gwynn and we say, oh, there's no striving singles at all in Gwynn. You know, so you can kind of, it's interesting to compare across geographies, and I really encourage you to do that, to peel a page like this off. If you're interested in Ishpeming or Negaunee, take the Ishpeming and Negaunee and the city of Marquette pages that all look the same and line them up on your kitchen counter or your desk and like compare them that way. And look to see which target markets are migrating to Marquette and maybe bypassing Ishpeming and Negaunee. And you can, I'm giving you permission to deduce that you could maybe intercept them if you built what they are looking for. If they're bypassing Negaunee and Ishpeming today and going to Marquette, you could strategically think, I wonder if I could figure out what they are actually looking for and I could build that product and maybe intercept some of them. So that is absolutely a way that I would like you to read the chart and read the data. So I sometimes refer to it as, I get myself in trouble sometimes when I say this, but it's okay to steal from your neighbor. You like, be competitive. You know, if I'm just going to pick on a geography, but I'm not trying to be intentional about it. Like if West Ishpeming has a market potential, but just doesn't manage to get it done, the city of Ishpeming could say, you know what, we'll take your market share and we'll build to it. And that we're going to double our numbers because you're not meeting the market potential for your numbers. We'll just take yours and build to it. Or Negaunee could do that to Ishpeming, or could do it to Marquette. Gwynn could steal from K.I. Sawyer, or vice versa, you know, in that same kind of region. It's going to be tough for some of these markets. You have to be realistic. Like, you know, are you really building, you know, waterfront type condos and townhouses in Gwynn or K.I. Sawyer? Maybe not, but you know, be realistic about what you feel you could really intercept. So now I'm going to backtrack, and this is, I warned Antonio that I would bounce around a little bit. Going back to section 1C, back to page 1. Flipping past the narrative. We already looked at the housing mismatch. And then I'm going to go back to this first page that looks like this. So I'm going to explain how to read these pages. And what time is my hard stop? Is it 9:30?
Let's aim for 9:40. Since we're going to hold off on questions.
40. He just gave me some extra time. Thank you. So, I know I tend to ramble a little bit, and so I apologize if I do that, but there's so much on the page, and I really want you to be able to digest and perhaps even explain these pages to somebody else. That's why this is so important. This is why I'm doing we're doing a study group session today rather than a presentation. So these pages are critical. The pages that are towards the front of the report are the most important. So I don't take the conclusions and bury them in the back of the report. When you pull up the market study, it's not like, here's the demos and here's the supply and here's the demand and the conclusion is at the back and the recommendations are the very last thing. I actually move the market potential up to the very front of the report. So if you ever wanted to peel off a piece of the report, peel off sections A, B, and C, in your region, A, B, and C. So there's two charts on this page and the data is the same. So first of all, I have to remind myself, I always read the title first. And the very first word is annual, which means everything on this page is a 1-year snapshot. It's not 5 years, it's 1-year snapshot. So everything on this page you can do in 2025, and then you can do it again in 2026, and then 2027, and do it every year for 5 years. If none of that momentum gets going, if we don't get it done, then this data is really good for 10 years. But if we start building, we can respond to this market potential, and the market starts to shift a little because maybe you're being creative and bold and imaginative with the building formats and working with developers and projects, and hey, we're getting things done, we're getting it built, then maybe we do an update after 5 years. Just to kind of refresh this and see have the target markets changed? Have you tried to build forced driving singles and you succeeded and they came and now we need to refresh and just kind of see how we did. So a 1-year snapshot. And so this first page, this word is very important. It's the first word in the second row of the title, the word capture. And circle this word because it's so important. And you will see that I capitalized it and underlined it in this paragraph in the middle of the page. This paragraph here is intended to give you the words to explain the chart to somebody else. This is almost literally what I would say. It's okay, both charts on this page, this is a conservative market potential based on in-migration of brand new households only, excluding internal movership. And so if you can imagine, there's also a group of households that are just shuffling within the city, right? I'll buy your house and I'll rent, your place, and people just kind of move from one address to another within the city. This chart, this page does not include them. This is only in migration. And then it says there's a need to capture, and here's that word again, capture these new households moving into the city by building new housing units. So I'm this is all brand new. And it's in the title too. It says capture with new builds. These are new builds. These are not rehabs. This is brand new construction. And by the way, these numbers are not adjusted for outmigration. And I get that question a lot. Why wouldn't you adjust for outmigration? Because in a lot of communities like Gwynn, for example, they may be attracting 20 new households every year, but they might be losing outmigration of 25 households. So now I have a -5 as a net, and I can't run the model on a -5. So that it's a methodology challenge, but it's also a policy challenge, a strategic challenge. To say, if I conclude that I have 100, well, let's say 500 housing units in Gwynn, and I have 500 households, that suggests I have a perfect match, and therefore I do not need to build anything new. I don't need to build, I have 500 households, 500 housing units, and it's a perfect match, and I've got 20 households that move in, but 20 leave, so why would I build? And that is how communities get stuck. That's how they get stuck. That's how they don't grow. So saying that I'm going to focus only on in-migration is a kind of a policy position to say, I'm assuming that you want to grow. I'm assuming that you actually want to build new housing units for new households migrating into your community. And I'm assuming that you would like to offer them with new choices. I'm also, so on these charts, I'm also making this assumption that it feels like an assumption, but it's not quite true. It's an implied. I'm implying by saying, okay, there's 150 owners migrating into the city of Marquette every year, brand new owners. So I'm implying that, you know what, I'm suggesting that you should build 150 new housing units. And that implies that all of those brand new households would each purchase a brand new unit. But we know that that's not really reality. It's messier than that. And I can't unravel the messiness. So what I do is I just make a declaration that if there's 150 brand new households migrating into the city, that is a reasonable approximation of the number of housing units that you could build each year. But when you build them, some of them will be purchased by households that already live in the city. And some of the brand new households that move into the city will actually purchase something that was pre-owned. And that's where the messiness kind of comes in. It's like, okay, existing households are going to buy my new units and new households are going to buy pre-owned units. And to try to sort that out is not something that I can do analytically. So I say 150 new households is a reasonable approximation of just how many housing units you should build. So 260 renters are also migrating into the city of Marquette each year. And by the way, there's a note up here, important note. Those 260 renter households exclude the students that I talked about earlier. That's why I was pointing out colleges and cafes and striving singles. I took those two groups out of this data. So this 260 does not include students. And that's a really important distinction. Then also to clarify, to explain, 150 owners plus 260 renters is 410. And that's the number that's up here in this little title. You know, adding them together, 150 plus 260 is 410. And that same number is in the chart below. So this group is the same as this group. All I did is here it shows it by tenure. It's simplified. 150 are owners, 260 are renters. It's just a summation of the chart below. The chart below, I break it down a little bit more for you by building type. So I showed you before the mismatch. And of those 150 owners, only 65 of them would actually purchase a house or a detached unit. 60 of them would be willing to purchase a townhouse, and the rest of them, 25, would actually purchase a condo if they could find it. But we kind of have a mismatch on some of that. So we need to build these units particularly. And then of the renters, 260, but I don't want a developer to come in and say, oh, great, 260, I'm going to build a big apartment complex with 260 units or 2 apartment complexes with 130 in each of them, because the reality is that of those 260, almost half of them would choose an accessory dwelling or a small cottage or a subdivided house or a duplex or something, you know, a mansion style apartment or something that looks different than an apartment complex. And in fact, 110 of them would actually choose something like an urban loft or a walk-up building, which is sort of like an apartment, a small, cozy apartment building in an urban place, or maybe a cozy apartment complex that has a courtyard in it that I talked about before. So keeping that, so what happens is 260 might feel like a big number initially, but we start cutting into it. We start making cuts. We say, really think about what you're building. If you want to build houses, how many of them do you think you could actually, or cottages? Okay, let's say, you know, a 950 or 750 square foot, or even 550 square foot cottage. How many renters would actually rent something like that? And to start cutting into the data. The next page is also important. The words, circle the word, the first word in the second row of the title. retain. And this word is capitalized and underlined in the paragraph in the middle of the page. And it says both charts on this page, it's still a conservative market potential, but this time we're looking at internal movership. These are the folks that are just shuffling from one address to another within the city. So they also could be candidates for housing units. And again, it's messy. It's like, okay, how many are moving from one address to another, but they're just moving from a pre-leased place to another pre-leased place? Or how many are going from a pre-leased place to a brand new apartment or condo or loft? And it's hard to unravel that. So again, the way I describe this is that 155 owners are shuffling from one address to another within the city every year. 155 existing owners already live in the city, but just changing addresses. And I say that's a reasonable approximation of the number of units that we should probably rehab. Like when somebody moves from one location to another, we're hoping that they're we're hoping that they're trading up in some way, that they're improving their quality of life, especially for renters. So I'm hoping that if we have 455 renters, which by the way excludes students, 455 renters shuffling within the city every year, hopefully the landlords are doing something to improve those units. And we could call it a remodel or an upgrade or a rehab, or maybe, just an update, or just bringing it up to code, or doing something to improve, to upgrade that unit for the renters and improving the quality of housing. So that's just, again, a reasonable approximation. Then the same numbers are below. You'll see the arrow on the right-hand side at the top of the page. The arrow changed. Like on the prior page, I have the arrow going from the outside into the circle. It's just kind of like a visual reminder. These are in-migrating, right? And now the arrow is inside the circle. And these are households that are moving within. So the next page, circle this first word in the second row of the title and the word change. It's now intercept. This is the upside. I often get developers that say, yeah, Sharon, but these numbers are a little conservative because if I build what isn't here yet, I could actually intercept households that are currently bypassing me. And I said before, yeah, I want to encourage you to try to do that, especially if your neighbors aren't stepping up to the opportunity with new builds. So by building something that isn't yet in the community, there's a it's kind of that developer, you've heard it many times, I'm sure, build it and they will come. It's kind of that idea. And I want to put a number to that. And that's what this is. It's saying, hey, if there's a little bit of an upside, and this is how big that upside is, about 30, you could potentially build an additional 30. So, going to all three sheets combined, 150 units for sale, owner occupied, 150 for new households, plus 30 units to intercept households that are bypassing. So we're now up to 180 units. And then I have some developers who say rehabs, I don't need to do rehabs. Actually, what I want to do is actually build new units for the households that are migrating within. So that becomes the aggressive scenario. If I say I'm not going to do rehabs and instead I'm going to build a new house for every new household, plus a new house for every household that's moving from one address to another, plus I'm going to intercept households that are bypassing, and I roll all three numbers together, that's an aggressive, not to exceed maximum threshold. That's really an aggressive scenario. So I'm going to check my time, keep us on schedule. And I have a couple more charts to show you. So everything that I talked to so far excluded the colleges and cafes and the striving singles. And if I flip one more page, let's see here, make sure I'm going to the right page. So let's see, if I go past those first 3 pages of charts that look like this, go to the 4th page. So it's basically Marquette City, capture with new builds, and then retain with rehabs, and then intercept with new builds. Add all 3 pages together for the aggressive not to exceed, then flip 1 more page and it seems to start again, doesn't it? It's like, oh, we're back to annual market potential capture with new builds. What's different on this page is that this one includes the colleges and cafes. That's the only difference, is I took those 2 groups and I added them back in so you could see what it does to push the numbers up just visually. And it's in that important note in here. The 680 renter households include 420 student households. So that's the only difference. And then there's 3 pages of that. Include students. And include students and include students. And then I get to this page that I showed you before, Antonio, it's this one again. In Marquette City, and it says at the top, capture of new owners. These are the target markets for the city of Marquette for the owners. And this is the 150. Here's that same number again. Brant, these are new households moving into the city, and this is who they are. And so of the owners, 13 of them will be family fantastic in Clyde. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect, right? The number might be 10, it might be 15, but you get a sense of magnitude out of this. 13 of them will be similar to no place like home. So if you can almost feel like their lifestyle preference. And these are the most affluent at the top. A2 is actually among the richest in the nation. So American royalty is actually number 1, and American royalty is not a target market for Marquette County because none of them live here today. None of them, American royalty is not moving to Marquette County today. But Platinum Prosperity is, and in fact, 4 of them could potentially migrate into the city of Marquette this year. And then Family Fantastic, there's some groups in here that really are, they're cultural to the great recreational resources that you have in the 4 seasons of recreation when it snows, right? Family Fantastic, and let's see, I'm gonna keep going through here real quick. So stock cars and state parks, they're not showing up in the city, but they're definitely in the county. Destination recreation, only 2 will come to the city, but others will go to other places in the county, and that's why they're on this list. So stock cars, state parks, destination recreation, sports utility families, Family Fantastic, you get the idea. They're here for a reason because of all the great resources that you have. And they have fairly deep pockets. But then there's a group here that is maybe they're just struggling to get by, or they're living modestly, and they have small kind of rambler or sweet houses, either in an urban place or maybe a rambler out in the country a little bit more, maybe even mobile homes possibly. True Grit Americans and town elders and senior discounts. Those are the households, those are the lifestyle clusters and the target markets that maybe need a little bit of help or maybe struggling to get by. So the incomes, I happen to know from my 20 pages of data on each one of these target markets, I know what their incomes are and nationwide, and then I can make an adjustment for your local community. And so I've done that adjustment for you. And so before I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, I want to clarify that this is the capture of new owners. So 150, this is for the new builds. And then if you flip the page, it says annual market potential, capture of new renters. And this number is 680, and there's a clarification in here that this includes the students, the colleges and cafes and striving singles, and you can see them right in here. You can see them. So if you don't want to build to them, you just kind of like put your finger, hide those two bars. So what's left? 51 of the renters fit into this category called Bohemian Groove, that target market. And 28 are senior discounts, so they need a little help. Family troopers, that's 27. They seem kind of low on the list, but they actually are about market rate. They're at about 100% of AMI, roughly. So family troopers, anyone that would be inclined to strap to carry a gun for any reason, often in their profession. So they may be security guards, they may be weekend warriors in the military, they may be police officers, or they may just, it may be that that's their lifestyle is to carry. So, and then full steam ahead though, digital dependence, full steam ahead, those O groups are very much urbanites. So by urbanites, I mean, they're inclined to buy something that's in an urban setting. And it doesn't have to be right downtown, but it could be fringe downtown or transitional to downtown or within established kind of urban neighborhoods that have a traditional kind of street grid pattern. You know, the city blocks that we already have, they're inclined to move those locations, and Bohemian Groove as well. But when we climb up to status-seeking singles and no place like home, family fantastic, aging of Aquarius, they're more inclined to buy a house or rent a unit that's a little more, not necessarily urban. So they're more inclined to be rural. So lots on the target markets. And then what I'm able to do, what I was talking before, like I know their incomes, I was saying that and I was getting ahead of myself. These pages are green in your handout. If you have a color copy, you'll see that the color changed from blue to green, except for those of you who might be colorblind, I apologize for that. But it's basically these are the dollars, green for money, just to catch your eye that you're now looking at, you're now looking at value brackets. So of the new builds, here's the number again, 150 is the total, and here's their inclination to tolerate different price points. So this is another place where developers have to make a cut, and you can make the cut with them. If I say there's 150 new households migrating into this city and you need to build 150 new units, I'm not necessarily saying that 150 new houses priced at $450,000 and above, because that's just not reality. We saw from the target markets that not all of them are affluent. They can't all afford $450,000, but I can tell you roughly what they would be willing to tolerate. And that's what this page is intended to do. So if a developer says, I will only build something that's $275,000 or more, then I will say, great, let's draw a line right here and just draw that line and take those numbers out. And this is what your potential is to build 275,000 or more. Or they may even say, you know what, I need 350,000 in order to cover my cost, which I will say, actually, there's ways to do better. But 350,000, if they insist, then I have to take those numbers out and add those together. And then that is their market potential. So we have to take a slice. Every step of the way, we slice the data down depending on what the developer is willing to do. Hopefully we'll have some developers who say, oh my gosh, I could build small cottages around a courtyard and rent them to modest, you know, I don't quite want to say low income, but let's say workers who I need to hire contractors. I need roofers and, you know, tiled people, and I need, you know, someone to hang drywall and someone to put up siding and install windows. And I need all these contractors to get my projects going. We're struggling to get contractors to move into Marquette County to actually help us get these houses built, to get these units built. So let's focus on building some workforce housing that we could rent to contractors. And I will share that there's going to be high inclination that they would rent small cottages. They don't want to be warehoused into apartments, apartment complexes. Please avoid building apartment complexes and calling it workforce housing. Let's build small cottages around courtyards for lease, for mixed incomes, really. Some of them, could be rented by contractors, but not necessarily all of them. Some of them may be rented by grad students. Some may be rented by individuals who are just starting over, existing residents that live within your community that are just starting over. So it may be it may actually be quite diverse. And where I can share with you that of those 150 new owners looking to purchase a house in Marquette City, the city of Marquette, 40 of them would hope to find something $250,000 to $275,000. And I was just talking with Ann about some of the units that she was working in, kind of right in that price bracket. 7 are actually hoping to find something $200,000 to $225,000. So those are pretty modest price points. And hopefully we can have developers or agencies, with assistance from, federal money that rolls through the states. Maybe there's opportunities here to leverage programs to help make this happen. We really need to build in here in order to attract and meet the needs of contractors who are needed to help build the units. We have a catch-22. We're kind of stuck in a paradigm, it's like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? It's like, we have to build housing to attract contractors that we need to build housing. How do we get under that and, out of that kind of cycle? And the best way is to just do the best we can and try to address this need. And it will make it easier then to build in these higher price brackets. I will also share, there's also kind of a school of thought that if we build in here, or let's say we build in here, we're actually creating a bit of a release valve, a pressure release valve on lower income opportunities or opportunities for the lower echelons. This idea that if you build in here, some of these folks can trade up and actually, provide more housing availability for lower income households. So sometimes the lowest income households just can't afford a new build, or there aren't enough new builds in their price bracket. No matter how hard we try, there's always going to be an affordability challenge. There will be our shortage on affordability is profound everywhere across the nation. So it's really hard to close that gap. So we want to address that as best we can, but it helps too to kind of build in the 80 to 120% of AMI kind of bracket as well. But just what I'm really trying to say is 150 units, we can't all build $450,000 houses. So try to avoid that and work with your developers as best you can to help them understand how profound the need is. And the next page is renter. And this is probably, thank you, Antonio, for flipping to the next one. The next one is renter, and you can see out of the 680, including students, that 190 of them, almost 200, and actually if I take 192, 354, about 400 of them, so 2/3 of them practically, will hope to find something that's, $1,200 a month or less. 2/3 of them will say, I can pay $1,200 or less. And only 1/3 will pay more than that. And there's only going to be a few, like 10 plus 18 plus 6, I'm 25, 30, 35, 45, 45 of them. Out of 680, only 45 will tolerate a price of $1,700 a month or more. So if a developer says, that's what I need, then we have to peel these other numbers off. That's all you get, 45. Don't build more than that at $1,700 or more a month. So I hope this is helping. I might actually be a little short of what Antonio gave me, but I think that's okay because it gives us a few minutes for questions. What did I miss? Show of hands? Yes. Yes, so there's always a shift. Absolutely. There's a shift over time. Experian updates their revises the lifestyle cluster data that I purchased. They revise it about every 5 years. And so there are transitions that happen. I wish they would revise it more often, but sometimes they revise it so profoundly that I have to, update my entire model. And sometimes they revise it when I'm in the middle of a market study. But I think it's important that they do so because we all transition over time. If you imagine, if you have a youth in your home and you're anticipating at some point they're going to move out, right, and rent their first place, and maybe meet their significant other, and then buy a house, and then start their own family, and then maybe their first house was a starter home, and then they trade up into a bigger home, and then they age, and eventually maybe they decide that they might want to downsize into a smaller house, not necessarily in an apartment. We can talk about that too. Antonio and I were talking last night about kind of this notion that age in place households may want to actually downsize into an apartment. And, we can talk about that as well. But we transition over time, every generation, and Experian will continue updating this data. That's another reason why I think it's helpful sometimes to do an update after 5 years. And that's why I tend to say this data is good for 5 years. If nothing's happening, you could push it to 10 years. But at some point, the 18-year-old that lives in your home right now looking for their first place to rent, they're now 28 years old and they've changed. And we have to catch up to that. They change quickly. And then pretty soon they're 38 and now they're married and they have 2 kids, maybe. But so good question. I hope I answered that. I'm not sure I answered it exactly the way you were asking it, but yes, question here.
This is primarily on the very first
Yep.
chart you had up there with the housing mismatch. I'm wondering how the demand was determined and whether there was a way to filter out their budget. I guess what I'm getting at is how do you determine demand if someone's coming in saying this is what we're looking for, but they already know they can't afford what they really want.
So this is based on the propensity of the households to actually tolerate different prices. So, it's actually a reflection of the next page at the bottom where I'm showing, what their inclination is to choose different building formats. It's all, this housing mismatch is a summary of all the other pages, basically. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Well, I mean, that helps. I'm just wondering if there's any way to determine what the demand would be if, say, there was a way to build single-family homes more affordably and the prices could be lower. I mean, would we actually have that much of a mismatch then if people could afford a single-family home? I mean, would someone choose to live in a condo if they could afford a single-family home?
Yes, I think I hear what you're saying, but allow me to say that I think this already reflects that adjustment. I think that adjustment is loaded into the entire analysis, and this is just a summary of that analysis. So the whole process I'm actually showing, I'm actually going through just real quickly to explain what my model looks like. It's like my model is 71 rows long for 71 lifestyle clusters. And then I know of those, each cluster, what percent are owners, what percent are renters. Of the owners, what percent will choose a house, what percent will choose a townhouse. Of those owners choosing a house, what percent will pay this much, what percent will pay that much. So it's all reflected through the entire analysis. And then what I do is I roll it up. I do the math the whole way through. And then I roll it up and that's what's reported on this page. Yeah, so I would say income tolerance locally adjusted. I mean, adjusted for the incomes of each area. Yes, question here.
The potential retained and intercept owners of the street population, they follow the same distribution on like price tolerance. If they were like in market, would it be the same profile
Yes.
as someone out of market?
Yes, so on the capture versus retain versus intercept, I did not try to make an adjustment for different incomes based on the, I didn't change the profile of those three data sets. So kind of the profile is, I don't really have a way to do it. So basically I know who's inclined to migrate into the city and I'm able to study that profile and I can run the math to say, X% will migrate in and X% will shuffle within and X% I can intercept, but I don't try to change the profile or the incomes for the three data sets. They're all, they're reflections of each other. Yes. Yes, thank you for reminding me. So do I have some of those sheets in here? Yeah.
Does that data on lifestyle clusters?
So not their incomes. I didn't include that in the report, but for these target markets, the top target markets for the county, like the top, I want to say maybe the top 10, it might be the top 15 or so of these target markets. I have one-page profiles in the complete study. And I'm sorry, I don't have any in your packet to show you, but let me try. Is there a way to pull, do you by any chance have the complete study document 1 at your fingertips?
I will have to retrieve it real quick.
Yeah. I probably have it on my flash drive.
We can probably do it on the internet. Do you know if we can get it?
Can you pull it up on there? Or I have it on my flash drive that I could show you.
If you have it, I can.
I do. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I have it.
We have about 10 more minutes here of questions, so we have plenty of time for questions. Thank you.
Would be document 1, I believe. We're going to try to pull it up, but I will, just in case we can't get there in time. Maybe I could pull it up during our breakout sessions too, and try to show you. But so I have a one-page profile on each of the target markets, the top 15 target markets. So let me pull one out, like for example, digital. Well, actually, I'm going to look at colleges and cafes, which is a really big one, right? So there's a chart that shows it will be across the title. So it'll be across the title. It'll say colleges and cafes. And then it'll show what % of them are renters. And it'll show what % of the renters move each year and what % of the owners move each year. It will also show, at the bottom what % will choose a detached house, a condo, a townhouse, an apartment complex kind of thing. And then you'd be able to flip through the pages. Yeah, you're in the right spot. Yeah.
So we have the cluster.
Yeah, those are the 71.
And then we have the
And
definitions.
yep, keep going a little bit. And then there's a page that shows a one sentence description of each one. And this page, oh, yep, keep going.
Keep going.
Oh, let me scroll through.
Sure, please.
Real quick, and bear with me. And if you can kind of just hold your conversations for afterwards, that will help us. Just bear with me, please, because I want to show you this if I can find them. I know they're here. So bear with me. Scrolling through, yay, we found one. I wonder how, can you snap one of those to full page? There we go. It looks like this. I hope that was sort of what you were picturing when I was describing it. Upper left-hand corner, what percent would be inclined to choose a new unit versus something that's a little more than 10 years old? And that's on the upper left-hand corner. Upper right-hand corner, I can show you of the Platinum Prosperity, 97% are renters. So you get a real quick snapshot, and everything on this page is specific to the housing market. I have different pages when I do a retail study. And a different page if I'm selling shoes, like what percent want Velcro and what percent want to tie their shoes. You know, there's so much data, but I'm peeling off the pieces. And Antonio is patiently navigating the glitch there. And then in the middle of the page, it shows what percent move each year. So of the 97% of the owners, only 4% move in any given year. 4% is low. That's a low number. The national average for owners is 6%. And then of the renters, well, only 3% are renters, but of those renters, 16% move in any given year. That's really low. The average is nationwide for all households is 25%. So Antonio, can you kind of scroll to the bottom of the page? Yeah, I know that thing keeps popping up, but we'll ignore it. Right there. So at the bottom of that same page, inclination for them to choose different building sizes and inclination to choose an urban versus a rural place. So of this, again, it's the same group, Platinum Prosperity, I think it was. 47% will choose to live in a city, 33% want a smaller city like Nagani or Ishpeming, and 19% will go to a rural place. And almost all of these buyers want a house. Almost all of them would choose a detached house. So Antonio, can you go to, here, I'll come over if you don't mind. I want to find another one.
Sure. Family
Yeah,
focused.
keep going, keep going, keep going. More, more, keep going. That sticky message wants to pop up. I'm trying to get into the renter group. So all the owners are together and there we are. Now we're in the renters. So let's look at Wired for Success. That was kind of, or any one of these, it doesn't matter. Bohemian Grove, that's a good one. So now we're into the renters. 90% of this group is renters. 10% will choose something brand new. Of those renters, 35% move every year. Very different. Renters have much higher movership rates than owners. And if you can imagine, there's a reason, right? If you're an owner, you're more likely, this is all correlated data, correlated variables. You're more likely to have 2 wage earners, more likely to be locked in a mortgage, more likely to have children who are in school. If one of you loses the job, you don't uproot and move because the other one still has a job. So maybe you just try to find a different job and you stay. So owners tend to be more settled and less inclined to pull up roots. Renters, the thing that is this paradigm about renters, that renters are, you know, kind of like, dare I use that word, riffraff. They bring trouble and bad problems into our social communities, right? That's changed so much. Renters are now so diverse. It's really, really changed. So renters are more diverse in terms of income and from all walks of life and many reasons why they prefer to be renters. Many of them are mature with good incomes, and they do tend to be, they are more likely to be singles, but often they just want to be footloose and free. I mean, I talk to so many, you know, young up and coming professionals these days, you know, with a good high school degree or, you know, even a technical school degree or a bachelor's degree, you know, and they're saying, no, I want to live where I want to live and I want to be footloose and free. Why would I buy a house and lock myself in a mortgage and then I'm stuck? You know, so there's the whole shift in mindset about wanting to be a renter or an owner. So keep that in mind. That's why developers are building lofts. You know, they're building, you know, townhouses for rent and cottages for rent because they know that they're gonna have, gosh, if 35% of their renters move every year, that means every 3 years, all of their units turn over. And they know how to manage that. That's part of the management business. And it's okay. It's a lifestyle choice. So to not be afraid of that, don't be afraid of the renters and consider building diverse building types for them. So I hope this is answering your, that was a long answer to your question. Yes. Yes, I am, but I think I have some of that data in the demographic analysis. There's a separate, again, the report is several documents intentionally kind of designed to split things apart to make it easier to navigate. And I think I have a migration analysis actually in the demographic packet. Yep, in the back.
Is it more of a, what's driving?
Right, so you're not seeing growth because I'm not adjusting all of this data for outmigration. I'm basically saying you have 150 brand new owners migrating into the city of Marquette every year. You might actually have 150 that are leaving, but I don't care, let them go. I know that I'm basically saying that 150 brand new owners is a reasonable approximation of the number of new builds that you could build to enable you to grow. So if you want to grow, if you agree that maybe that's kind of a policy position within your local community, then that's how many units you could potentially build to enable yourself to grow. But if you don't build them, how can you grow? You know, it's like, it's sort of, you're in a catch-22. That's how communities get stuck. When we say, we don't need any, so we won't build. Well, now we're not growing. Well, that implies we don't need any, so we don't build, and now we're stuck.
And from a policy perspective, we're talking about growth. I guess we're not talking about actual spatial expansion.
Right.
Amending codes to allow for some of these other products to happen where products already exist, right? So tear down and build something that's more in line with the market in existing districts as opposed to grow.
So you just hit on something and you just gave me a great segue into the breakout session. So the next part of our summit this morning is that we're going to break up into some groups, and we might be going to another room. I'll let Antonio navigate that with you in just a minute, but we're going to break up into groups and talk through this a little bit more, because this is why I really wanted you to see the numbers and feel the data and be able to go into the report and be able to point and say, okay, I know I'm reading this correctly. Now work with us, because what we'd really like to hear from you, we have a number of questions that we're going to throw at you. And we're going to start our breakout sessions in a real positive way. I'm going to ask you basically, what makes your community a great place to live? Like, what makes you special? What makes you stand out? Why would you want to live in Gwynn? Why would a developer want to build in Gwynn? You know, can you help me find a reason? And then critical thinking, what's in the way? What are the obstacles, the challenges and impediments? Is it your master plan, zoning ordinance? Is it policy? Is it permit review process? I'm throwing you a few easy things, right? But think through this. What are the obstacles and challenges? And then strategic thinking is the last bit. How do we remove those obstacles? How do we make it better? Are there specific things that you can identify? So please chew on those questions a little bit during our break, and then we'll come back together. And one last question up front.
So two things. The first thing is the census data for 2020 underreported the city of Marquette's population by 1,012 people. Just to clear that there was actual population growth in the city of Marquette. The other thing I was wondering about is when we have all this data based on income, I'd like to know is that based on the census data income?
It is based on a combination of the census plus the American Community Survey, plus I went through and studied those trends and those patterns over time and did forecasts myself. And if I thought that the number, especially for small places, this data can be really volatile. It can be volatile and there can be a high confidence interval on the American Community Survey data. So I am asking that you trust me that I looked at it for each place and tried to make adjustments if I felt that it was warranted.
I guess it's appropriate, but my concern is the large percentage of people that live in the city of Marquette are students. And so the income is generally going to be skewed.
Yeah.
Then
So I don't look at just the median household income of all renters, including all students. I look at the income of students and then the income of American Prosperity, and then the income of senior discounts and the income of Family Fantastic. And I look at the incomes bifurcated by target market. So I'm here today. I'm on this journey with you. I will be kind of available during the breakout sessions to continue answering questions, especially as we work through the exercise. And then I'm here for the lunch and I'll stay after lunch. So you'll have other opportunities if you want to corner me or pull me aside for a sidebar conversation, please do. And thanks for your patience. I think we're out of time for that part of our program.
Thank you, Sharon. Round of applause for Sharon, please. Okay, we are perfectly on time here. We have a 5-minute break. Everybody can stretch, get some water refilled, etc. Just 2 quick things for the next session is the breakout session. On your tag, on your name tag, you're going to have the region that you were assigned. Please try to sit with someone in your region. So for example, since I'll pick on Blueberry Farms, K.I. Sawyer and Gwynn, if you are the minority today. So if you find yourselves amongst different tables, please try to sit together. And Iron Core includes Ishpeming, West Ishpeming, Negaunee. Please try to sit in we may have to shuffle a little